Hi, ladies and gentlemen. Terry Martin with the Illinois Channel. We're joined by Jeff Berkowitz of Public Affairs, and we are going to be discussing rather in depth some of the coverage of the Illinois legislature that just concluded its spring session. And of course, the big thing that they always do, Jeff, is they pass the state budget. Let's listen to what the governor had to say to the news media the day after the legislature ended its session.
For the third straight year, I'll sign into law another balanced budget for Illinois that demonstrates fiscal responsibility, works with a progressive vision of governance. Today, ours is a budget that addresses the historical structural deficit and makes responsible choices, paying off debt early, nearly eliminating our backlog of bills, and making critical investments to stimulate economic growth, jobs, and opportunity for our people.
Well, Jeff, according to the governor, it sounds like Illinois is on the track to getting everything back on track here.
It's just a wonderful thing, and all is good, and everybody go back in your houses. There are no problems. Those things the Republicans are saying, well, those are just nattering nabobs of negatives. Ignore them. Listen to them at your peril. That's kind of what he's saying, right?
You know, there was an awful lot, and the whole point of this show that Jeff and I will be focusing on is some of the stuff that wasn't discussed and that the lawmakers didn't have a chance to discuss. Jeff, last week, you and I did a preview of the end of the session. Now we're doing it after the fact because we know what came down. And what happened last week, I predicted that the legislature would get the budget at the last minute. And let's take a look at the comment I made, followed by what actually happened on the floor. Where is the better democracy? Where is the better approach to budgeting? The lawmakers aren't getting the state budget ahead of time, and the people of this state ought to be fed up.
Note this amendment, Floor Amendment 1, was introduced at 12:15 this morning. Then Floor Amendment 2 came sometime late this evening. And Floor Amendment 3 was introduced just, 5 or 6 minutes ago. These are not page and line amendments where we can simply see what the changes are. These are gut and replace amendments. So we really have no ability to analyze what's changed between one draft and the next. What is the total revenue projection for fiscal year 22?
That would be $42,315,000,000 in GRF.
So Jeff, let me put this in context for what Tom Demmer, and Tom Demmer is the number 2 man in the Illinois House caucus on the Republican side. And look, he was asking the majority leader, Greg Harris, what are the revenues? I mean, folks, is this a democracy when we have the Republicans shut out? And you had a $42.3 billion state budget. And when did that come to the floor? As we predicted, literally at the last minute. I mean, this was 30 minutes at about 11:30 in the evening. They have to pass the budget before midnight on the 31st. And then they put this on short debate because they got it at the last minute. And this was in thousands of pages. I don't have the exact number, but over 1,000 pages of a bill. How could anyone know what they were voting on? And the whole point here, Jeff, is one, the Democratic majority don't want the Republicans to know what they're voting on because that's how they get this done. It's like we're putting a gun to your head, the time clock, and either you vote for this or we're going to be in all summer. So what do you want to do? The Republicans voted against it. The Democrats don't need them, and they voted to pass it. But folks, this is a bad way to run a democracy.
No, in short, the way it's supposed to run, as we remember in February or so, the governor delivers the state of the state and the budget. He's supposed to lay out the beginning of this process. We're supposed to spend the next 4 or 5 months, not we, but we in conjunction with our state legislators, looking at this, refining it, having hearings, having reports, studying this, deciding how to allocate our priorities. Instead, we get it at midnight. Not we, the legislators get it. So none of this thoughtful, rational analysis can occur. It all occurs if it occurs anywhere behind closed doors and seeps out. And that's the old Speaker Mike Madigan way. And it was supposed to be a new day with Chris Welsh. It was supposed to be a new day with Don Harmon. I don't see it. It's new day with Governor Pritzker. So what we need is a clash of ideas, a clash of thoughtful, responsible views by the majority and the minority, and we ain't getting it. And the Republicans have to share some of that responsibility because they need to stay focused and they need to say what's really important. We're not discussing substance, both short run and long run.
One thing
They need to do that. That's their job, and I'm not sure they're doing it. When I say they, I mean the leaders, I mean the representatives and senators, I mean the current crop of people running for governor. I'm asking a lot, but that's what has to happen here from the Democratic Party, from the Republican Party. We're balanced here. We're not
all right,
getting
let's
as
move.
citizens what we
Keep
need.
moving here. The thing is, the Republicans. One thing I will give them credit for, certainly the House Republicans have through the spring, and they know that they don't have many votes to stop this. They're out of power, and the Democrats can just run roughshod over them, and they do. What the House Republicans have been doing, to your point, has been holding a series of press conferences to get their word out. So I do think the House Republicans, the Senate Republicans could certainly be doing a lot more of that. And also, where are the gubernatorial candidates on the Republican side? Part of the problem, too, for them, to be fair, too, is they don't always get the coverage from the media. The media is not necessarily buying into it. And, folks, it is what it is. Let's take a look at the reality. We talk about the governor saying that, we're getting back to responsible governing. But, Jeff, look at this. Illinois at the bottom of the barrel.
Yes, Terry, the gist of this, the slide that we're looking at now, comes from WirePoints. They did the research, provided the data, wrote the article, but here it is. Largest pension crisis in the nation, that's Illinois, far and away. More than $400 billion in unfunded pension liabilities. Number one, worst state in the nation. Worst credit rating in the nation. Second highest property tax in the nation. Third highest overall taxes. Third worst business environment. Record outmigration. Falling property values. One of only 3 states to lose population in the last decade. That's Illinois, that's West Virginia, that's Mississippi. Okay, that's not a record that the governor should be proud of. It would be nice to see a clash of ideas. The governor saying what he said, and then somebody on the other side saying what I just said, and have them go back and forth. Let's see what the truth is. Let's hear from Governor Pritzker. Let's hear from his critics, and then let's set up some goals. Whoever is right, if these things have to be addressed, let's start addressing them. Is that reasonable? I think it is. We're not doing that.
Well, exactly. And the thing is, how can you make any of these points if you're the opposition, if you're the Republicans, when you are given literally about 10 minutes for debate? And Tom Demmer, we're not going to show the whole process here of 10 minutes, but the point is Demmer was still asking questions when he was cut off by the speaker in the chair. He goes, this is on short debate, wrap it up, and because they needed to get to a vote so they could ram through this budget. I've had some of my Democratic friends say, oh, people know what's in there. They've been discussing this all along in committee. Folks, if you're on one committee, you don't know what they're discussing. If you're in the Judiciary Committee, you don't know what they're saying in transportation. You don't know what they're saying in the social programs committees. You don't have the ability to have the totality of what they're spending. And you certainly don't know what the Democratic majority stuck in there to become law that, you would fight very much, you'd be very much in opposition to if you knew it was in the budget. But you have no way of knowing that when you don't have a chance. Even Mike Madigan used to give them an hour to look over it or 2 hours to look over it. This was literally handed to them, about 20 minutes before they voted.
We are guaranteed by the U.S. Constitution in Article 4 a republic form of government. Not Republican, but republic. A republic is where you elect your representatives, but you can communicate with them. You can look at a draft. Why didn't we have a draft budget for the state legislators and for the population at large? Put it up on the website. Not all 13 million in Illinois are going to want to look at it, but some are. Then we're going to have a discussion. Then we're going to decide whether we're putting the right amount into pensions, the actuarial amount. Pritzker says it's a balanced budget. We'll see that. Well, by putting $11 billion, a quarter of a budget into pensions. No, others say if you're putting the right amount in, you would be putting 16 billion. I'm not saying that's the truth. I'm saying we should be having that discussion, and we can't, because we have been denied a republic form of government. We have been denied having
Well, and this is
legislators know what's going on.
That's right.
And us knowing what's
That's
going
right.
on.
And the thing is, I would say is, folks, it's you, the viewer, you, the people watching this. The state of Illinois is in a mess. And the governor might try to paper over this and saying we're getting back to responsible government as compared to what Bruce Rauner did. It's no longer about Bruce Rauner. Governor Pritzker is in his third year. He can say, obviously, the COVID came up and that impacted a lot of things. I'll grant him that. He can say a number of things. I think they, maybe because of COVID, tried to hold spending flat to a large extent compared to where they before jumped by billions of dollars in spending. But this is not good government, folks, and it's not good government. And people say, well, you know, Illinois is a blue state, and that's the way it is, and the Democrats are going to run it. And one of the things that came up this session, which I don't want to go off into just yet, but was redistricting. And it also comes up that, you know, it's the politicians picking their voters, politicians drawing the lines so that they can pack their districts and ensure that their party people are going to get elected. This is just not good. If you want good government, folks, this ain't it. Okay, you don't bring a budget for the whole state to the floor and offer lawmakers that you elected that are supposed to be representative, bringing you, voting for you when they don't know what they're voting on.
We are now spending read the title. Illinois spends now $3,000 to $6,000 more per student than its neighboring states do. This doesn't mean the amount of the contribution from the state of Illinois to education spending K through 12. No, this is the total spending, Terry. When you count all that comes from the federal government, from the state of Illinois, from the local government units, what are we spending? On average, we're spending $16,000 more than $16,000 per student. Go to that bottom line there, which is Indiana, they're spending $10,000 per student. So, you know, that's more than 50% more Illinois spends per student than Indiana. Do we get 50%? Where's the percentage of kids reading at grade level across the state? All those other states are in between. Those other lines, other neighboring states are in between. We are far and away the leader. And so the short of it is we should know how much we spend on K through 12 education. Is it 22% of the budget? Thereabouts.
Well,
okay?
not only that, and this is, I mean, as a side comment, which is I want to stay on the budget, but as a side comment on education, how many of the people that we're supposedly educating aren't being educated? I mean, they're dropping out of schools, or even as we said last week, a lot of kids with high school diplomas are functionally illiterate. We're spending a lot of money, $16,000 plus per student, and you're getting many of them, far too many, who are not being prepared to face the future. And by the way, let me before I throw it back to you here, the thing is, part of a lot of that spending, of course, is salaries for teachers. And Jeff, when we look at this, what's the problem in the state budget? Pensions. And the more you have,
pensions.
Yeah, I mean, this is all tied together, right? Teacher's salary and pensions. Over half the pensions are teacher salaries.
Yes, I mean, there are a lot of numbers there. There's a lot on that chart, but the main thing is these are ranking all the states and their pensions and where they are relative to each other. Illinois is far and away the worst. On the left means you're the worst. Illinois is as far left in many respects as you can get on this chart and otherwise. 28% of our state GDP is our shortfall, okay? Of our state GDP. Our pension shortfall equals 28% of our state GDP.
Well, when you say shortfall, do you mean what you're confusing me with the word shortfall?
Illinois
Are you
has
saying,
400
this is saying that we're spending 28% of our GDP on pensions, right?
No, it's not saying that, Terry.
Okay.
The pension shortfall, the $420 billion in pension liabilities
I see,
that
okay.
Illinois has.
So this is saying that
And
the fact is, yes, we are underfunding the pensions. The unfunded liabilities are $420 billion. And
No. Again, because underfunding makes it sound like if only we had put in the money we should have at the time we should have, we'd be okay. No, we have excessive, overly generous pensions, far above what anybody gets in the private sector.
right.
Ridiculous.
Right.
We
And
couldn't
we
fund
don't, we
them.
have high,
Couldn't
listen,
fund
we,
them.
I
That's our
want,
problem.
because this is not easy, which is if I'm confused, the audience is confused.
Yes.
I mean, we can't just throw out shortfall and understand what that means. The point is, we're not contributing enough to the pensions to fund the level of benefits they're getting. And because you're not
true.
putting enough in, and it's not because we're not,
You keep getting it wrong, Terry. You keep getting it wrong. Let me talk for 30 seconds. We set up a pension system a long time ago, and we continue to make it worse. These pensions are simply not competitive. They are way more than the private sector.
well, that's what I'm saying.
Nobody gets, well, so when you say we're not funding them enough, no.
Well, we are
set
not,
the
look,
level
we,
too high.
if I
We
could have
couldn't
finished my
possibly
thought,
fund
you're
them.
saying I got it wrong before I finished my thought. I don't care if they're getting $1 million a year in a pension. The question is, are we putting enough money in? Are we hey, teachers, you want $1 million a year pension? Fine. Here's how much money you got to put in for that. And where we are, if I can finish the thought,
I got it. Okay.
and people need to understand this. It's not how much they're getting, it's how much are we funding. And if you set the benefits so high, that of course we're not contributing. And it's not that the state is being stingy. It's not that the taxpayers are being stingy. It's that we never ask those who are getting pensions, the pensioners, we're not asking state employees or teachers to pay even remotely as much as they should be paying to fund the level of benefits that they're getting. And because you're putting only X number of dollars in when you should be putting 2 or 3 times X, you have an unfunded liability. Okay? It's a fundamental thing here for people to understand. And the pension benefits are too high relative to the amount of money that those who are going to get the pensions are putting in. And so they don't have skin in the game. And there's no incentive over the years, over the last 30 or 40 years, for these pensions to be properly funded, because the politicians were always getting contributions from the firemen, the policemen, the teachers. They still do. And because of that, they say, sure, we ought to boost your pensions. Sure, we ought to give you 3% a year automatic increase. And by the way, we're not going to make you pay more for those benefits. And because you're paying as if you're going to get $300,000 over the course of your career, when in fact you might be getting $2 million in benefits over the course of your career in pensions, that continues to add up year after year after year.
Terry, you need to stop using so many pronouns like we and you. We got to start saying, who is we? We is they is us, as they used to say in the cartoon. We, when you say we're not putting in enough, I thought you meant taxpayers. You mean to say the teachers who are getting an average pension currently around the state of Illinois, when they retire after 30 years, they're starting at 80K. They're not putting in enough to warrant that level of payout. And many of these things were set up where teachers were supposed to put in a half yearly, and half was supposed to come from the school district. They often were changed where it was all coming from the school district, and yet they
Here's the career teachers
right,
receive the most generous benefit among their peers.
right. Illinois again is on the left. Left is not good. Left is bad. It means they're talking a $3 million payout over the course of their pension. Look over on the right side. What is that? Yeah, I've got
Indiana's
on
at
my
168. No,
and
that's
that's
Iowa.
Texas.
Indiana's at $1.62,
Right.
and that's
And Texas is 128. So it's $1 million to $3 million. That's big bucks. You can't keep that going. And what are we doing, Terry? We need to get going on the rest of the show.
right. And
because
I
we'll
was going to
see
say, I want to
what
get
we
back
plan
to the
do is
governor.
discuss
Now
these
that
as
we talked
as we
about
go.
this and we have all these unfunded liabilities, and that's what's crushing the budget. But, Jeff, we shouldn't be debating it. I mean, we shouldn't have this debate. We should just say, here's $42 billion, sign off on the dotted line, don't read the fine print. That's what's going on in the legislature. The governor went out with Senator Kaler of Peoria. Let's listen to what the governor, and he talked about this and the growing pension debt and how that's crushing other items in the budget.
The idea here is to actually level the payments that are going into the pension system. So you don't want to take money out of the pensions. That's the last thing you want to do, right? We got to fully fund the pensions that are owed. The question is, how do you pay for those pensions? What's the amortization schedule, and how flat is that amortization schedule? Because right now those payments go up and up and up. They're going up about $500 million, depending on the year, every year, right? And that takes $500 million away from social services or other things that would normally be in a budget. And so we do have to address that. But again, and I know you want to hear about amortization, but I just want to be clear. There's not one thing that's going to solve this. It's going to be several things, and we're all going to have to work on those together.
Well, there we heard it. The governor is acknowledging something in response to a question that, look, these are big payments we're making into pensions, and they're going up $500 million a year. It's the amortization he's talking about, but he's going the wrong way. Remember how he talked about flattening the curve for COVID, flattening the number of people in hospitals? Now, that was flattening that curve. Now he's talking about flattening the amortization curve. That means putting less in. He didn't say it. Our problem, Governor, is we have these $400 billion in unfunded pension liabilities, and you need to lead, or somebody who wants to be governor needs to lead in saying, here's a plan to do something about it. It ain't flattening the amortization thing. That's kicking the can down the road. He said we weren't. That's what we're doing. He's acknowledging you can't keep putting more and more into pensions because that means less into current education, current human services, current Medicaid. He doesn't like that. But that's the choice he's giving himself by not addressing the problem.
Now, also, Senator Kaler spoke at that same press conference in Peoria. Let's listen to what he had to say.
Here's how you get legislation passed. You bring the stakeholders together and you have, a discussion, and you talk about all the different possibilities, and you have the governor and you have the legislature participating in that. A good example of that is the energy bill that's coming. And the governor was very active in that. We had all the stakeholders there. The House, the Senate was very active in that. And what you do is you get all the compromises that you need to, because the legislative process is a process of compromising, and you come out with, something that everybody benefits from. We would have done that if it had not been for the fact that we've had a pandemic for the last year and a half. When the governor is absolutely right, and that was really a great benefit to all of the police and firefighters in this state, is that we have consolidated those funds so that they can have higher returns.
With all due respect to Senator Kaler, he's saying, oh, this is wonderful. Look, we're going to solve this pension problem the same way we did just with ComEd. Well, that wasn't solved. We're going to get every stakeholders around the table, and we're going to give a little bit, and all will be good. Well, we didn't solve the energy problem is not solved. It wasn't solved well. We've got corruption coming out of our ears there. That's not the model, okay? Payoffs, not the model. Little bribes, not the model. So what is he talking about? He hasn't mentioned that.
I'll take the other side of that. I might say
they're in denial. They're in denial.
I might say Kaler has a point, but guess what? Then you got to work with the Republicans. You can't be treating them like they are just a minority that don't have to be listened to. You know, you can't be saying we need to work together to solve these problems and make the state whole. And then when it comes to the budget, we don't need your votes. We're just going to shove it down your throat.
Terry, you're being way too kind. We have a constitutional provision that says you cannot diminish the benefits, pension benefits, anyway. You know how that's how it's been construed by the Illinois Supreme Court. That is what needs to change. He needs to be blunt and say pension benefits have to be cut. He won't say it. The governor won't say it because their constituents are the unions, especially the public sector unions, which make up 46% of the public sector in Illinois is unionized. Okay, and those are their constituents. They don't want to say it. When they say it, when they say bring everybody around the table, they'll realize they got a problem because they don't want to come around the table because they don't got it, because they got a constitution that they think says you can't do anything to solve this problem, and I don't want to solve it by giving back some of my future pension
Look,
benefits.
before we run out of time, I want to bring in one of the reasons that we have one-party rule in Illinois is that every 10 years we redraw the political boundaries for the state lawmakers. And why every 10 years? Well, it's supposed to be based on the census. But this year they drew the political boundaries. The Democrats, again, did this on their own. And guess what? They didn't even bother with the political census data because it hasn't come out yet. Here's Representative Tim Butler speaking about that earlier this week.
Illinois woke up first thing this morning to find out who their politicians were going to be for the next 10 years. With legislation dropped in the middle of the night. And the chairwoman has no idea how that stuff was drafted. That's what she testified to today.
Terry, as we discussed before, this will update our viewers. When we last spoke about it, we were talking about redistricting as first proposed. The Democrats made it a little better. Now they have a map that has 14 incumbents, Republican House members, having to run against each other in a primary so the Dems can get rid of some incumbents, okay? 14 run against each other. They've juggled this thing. Not only are they picking their voters, that is the legislators, the Democratic legislators picking their voters, but now they're picking their opponents. They don't want to have 14 Republican incumbents. Put them against them, you'll only have at most 7. Okay? It's ridiculous. It's bizarre. I'd like to see the governor explain what I've just talked about and say this is a fair map. This is one he won't veto.
Well, the
I'd like to see
Republicans,
somebody ask him that question.
we got to go, but here's the thing. Well, let's just wrap up. Folks, is this how you want your democracy in Illinois to work? Do you want to have the $42 billion budget not being debated by lawmakers, but being thrown on the desk, thousands of pages of a document at the last minute? Do you want one-party rule where they can cut up the state politically so that you don't get to have a fair vote? And just this afternoon, we got Rodney Davis and other Republican lawmakers going around the state. So the Republicans are speaking out on fair maps. They're doing it. They did it yesterday. They've been doing it all spring. They're doing it again today. But folks, you know, it is what it is. And Jeff and I can't go into all the details, but we try to bring you some of what is actually going on behind the scenes here. And Jeff,
Let me close.
Go ahead.
Terry. So they didn't do what they should have, was put an amendment to the Constitution on the ballot that would give people a choice of whether they want to be able to cut pension benefits or have their legislators do that. They didn't put that one on. No, they put on something that would basically enshrine union market power in Illinois. If that passes, they put that ballot on to be voted on 2022. If that passes, you'll never be able to solve any of your problems. Completely the wrong thing. I don't hear people talking about that. They didn't know about the budget. They didn't know
okay,
what's just put on
we
the
got to
ballot.
close.
They
As
don't know.
always, there's never enough time. We thank you for watching, folks. Give us a thumbs up if you're watching this online and make a comment. Jeff, we'll see you again next week.
Thanks, Terry.